Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 129, where we are going to talk about being triggered and what's going on when that happens, why it happens, who's causing it, and how to work with it to put an end to the yucky feelings and the damaging effect it often has on your relationship. But before we dive into all of that, I want to make sure you didn't miss the exciting big news about my new Stop Taking It So Personally course. This is the first time I've ever released a little course like this that you can access anytime you want, on demand, and keep forever. Now, the course itself is new, but the content in it is tried and true. I've walked hundreds of people through this process of learning how to stop taking things personally so you can feel less hurt in your marriage and a whole lot more love. And the results that clients have gotten from this process have been outstanding. You can hear about some of those results over on the description page of the course, where you can also purchase the course. I've put that link in the description of this podcast, the show notes. You can also find it right on my website, www.lifeisworthloving.com. And in honor of this release, I am offering for a very limited time a special on it where you get $20 off until September 14th, 2023. And you get that special coupon for that directly into your inbox when you sign up for my email list. So I'm putting that direct link to hop on my email list and get that coupon, putting it right in the show notes. So definitely take advantage of that. If you know, like so many highly sensitive women, that you tend to take things personally. I know what that's like from experience. I know it's no fun. I know it's hard on our relationships. And I also know that you do not have to keep living like this. You can feel so much better and have so much better interactions, more loving interactions, more supportive experiences with your partner when you learn how to stop taking things so personally. All right, so let's dive into today's topic, which is actually quite related. And it's about being triggered. Taking things personally is one of the reasons we get triggered, right? And when we're triggered, we can feel feelings like hurt. So being triggered is a big contributing factor in marriage and relationship unhappiness. Whether we call it being triggered or we call it reacting or getting upset or being bothered by, right? When I say being triggered, it means we feel a strong emotion, like I said a minute ago, hurt, for example. And then often, although not always, we don't have to, we then act out of those feelings to the relationship's detriment. Now, the experience of being triggered can range from like a small irritation to really a full PTSD episode. So I want to make sure it's clear it can be linked to trauma, but it isn't always. It can be big feelings, big reactions, or smaller ones. When we're triggered, we can feel irritation, we can feel annoyance, but we can also feel a little bit of hurt or a lot of hurt. We can feel a little bit of frustration or a full-blown fury. We can feel slightly bothered to completely overwhelmed with so much emotion we're just frozen. We can feel that little sting of guilt, or we can feel a huge amount of shame. And mostly, as usual, the feelings and the actions that those feelings lead to cause problems in our relationships. Because when we're triggered, we are not in our wise brain, or our common connect nervous system, which is where we actually can work through things with our partner effectively, where we can communicate well, where we can calmly navigate things. When we're triggered, we're actually in what I call our lizard brain and our survival nervous system, which when we communicate or act from there, we get into arguments or we end up with discord or distance. Now, I want to make sure that you know that most of us have things that trigger us. Most of us have experiences here and there of being triggered. And it may be that we have more of them as HSPs because of our sensitivity and the tendency for hard experiences in our lives to have affected us more deeply than they would necessarily have of non-sensitive people. And of course, because of our deep, strong feelings, right? Like we feel them more than other people. So it would make sense that we'd get triggered more, or just it would be a bigger experience for us. And also because of sometimes our more specific needs or sensitivities to the environment. So understanding what it means to be triggered, what's really happening there, so that you can work with them is really important as a highly sensitive person. Part of making your relationship not just easier, but more loving and light and connected and fun is to not get triggered so deeply or so often, right? To calm those triggers or eliminate them altogether, which of course means working with them directly, which we're going to get into in just a few minutes. But healing your triggers or easing or eliminating them and the fallout that happens from them in your relationship actually starts with understanding what a trigger really is. So what is a trigger? So on the surface, a trigger looks like it's your partner's words or something he does that is the cause of your triggered experience. Like him making a noise that sounds like a scoff or a comment like, yeah, but. So it seems that these things are the cause of the strong feelings that arise in you. And it's really easy to blame those on, say, the noise or the comment. And there is a dictionary definition that I found that corresponds with this concept, this way of thinking about it. It defines a trigger as an event or circumstance that is the cause of a particular action, process, or situation. And that is almost always how it seems to us at first glance, or until you learn what I'm about to share. It almost always seems like it's the outer situation that's triggering you. But in fact, it isn't. The outer situation or the circumstance is actually just a cue that initiates internal programming that leads to the reaction and the emotions that come up in you. So your partner is saying, yeah, but that actually just is cueing some internal programming in you that gives rise to those emotions and whatever action you then take from there. So I found this dictionary definition that I like a whole lot better than that first one that I gave you, which is a trigger is something read, seen, or heard that distresses someone, typically as a result of arousing feelings or memories associated with a particular traumatic experience. So I want to say it's not always traumatic, which we'll get into more. It can be for sure, but it can also just be a yucky or unpleasant experience. So a personal example of what this looks like, as I shared in the recent episode about the relationship rule book. When my husband used to fall asleep while I was sharing something from my heart, that used to really upset me. And I learned later it wasn't the fact that he fell asleep that was upsetting me. It was that his falling asleep cued some internal beliefs and some old, unhealed, what we could call wounds, having to do with how worthy and lovable I felt, right? Like old experiences where I'd been dismissed or scoffed at or somehow gotten the message that I wasn't important. So I want to now address 3 things that cause this cue in you to trigger those emotions and whatever comes after those emotions, the actions, the behaviors. And I'm not going to say them in order of importance. I'm just going to share them. So the first one is your beliefs and habits of thinking developed from conditioning, like from your upbringing, what you were taught through family and society, which can include your relationship rules, like I talked about in that recent episode, and really any other unconscious or even conscious beliefs. Second thing that can cause this cue to trigger you is your nervous system state in the moment, how regulated or dysregulated it already is. And the third thing is implicit memories. So I've talked about the other two, the first two, some or a lot on the podcast already, and I definitely will do more of that in the future. So today I want to spend time on this last one, this implicit memory thing, because I've never talked about it before on the podcast. So researcher Daniel Schechter, I hope I'm saying that well, says that implicit memory happens when people are influenced by past experience without any awareness that they are remembering. So what? Let's unpack that a little bit. Implicit memories aren't the normal kind of memories you think of when you're like, oh, I can remember an event, right? I remember what shirt I was wearing, or I remember when I fell and I scraped my knee, or I remember when my husband used to fall asleep when I was talking, right? Implicit memories are actually memories in the body. So emotions from past experiences or events, often painful, get stored in the body via implicit memory, whether or not you consciously remember the event that led to those emotions. And as a side note, I want you to know this particularly happens when you don't know how to work with your mind, body, heart system, when those events are happening, when those feelings are coming up, which we don't know as children, when much of our implicit memories actually are occurring or getting stored. And we rarely learn how to work with as adults. So the events that you can actually remember, the events that actually happened, get stored in a different kind of memory, which is called explicit memory, which we can often recall consciously, right? Pre-verbally, as little ones, this can't actually happen. And so often we may not have an explicit memory of the event itself, but the memories of the experience get stored in implicit memory in our body. And later, if something out in our world, in our lives, cue it, it can show up in the present in the form of emotions. So not all implicit memories are trauma-based or emotion pain-based. The example of knowing how to ride a bike is an example of an implicit memory, a habit in the body, and like we're able to do it with no thought at all, right? Our body just remembers how to ride the bike. But we're talking about emotions on this podcast, particularly hard ones. And although implicit memory is very active when there is severe trauma, it also happens from quote unquote milder experiences and events in our lives that can happen even when we're being raised in loving families, including ongoing experiences as a young one of feeling alone, of feeling misunderstood, of feeling shamed. And although it does happen a lot in childhood, like these implicit memories are made a lot in childhood, they can happen at any stage, at any age in your life as well. So implicit memories give rise to emotions and not details of the events that encoded those emotions in us. And this is really key. With implicit memory, we unconsciously react to our present as if past experiences are happening now, emotionally. And so it's easy to think it's the event that's happening now that's causing the emotions when it's not. It's the implicit memory. Or some of the other things I talked about earlier, like our beliefs. So I'm going to say it in one other way because this could be a really new concept for some of you. In other words, when we are cued by something external that reminds an unconscious part of us about something that happened in the past, our body and nervous system still thinks it's happening now and reacts as such. So we feel big emotions even when the current situation is in fact very different than the original event. I found this beautiful quote. I love the quote by Gabor Mate, who's amazing. He wrote, this just happened to be in the book Scattered, which is actually about ADD. He wrote, a tone of voice, a look in another's eyes can activate powerful implicit memories. The person experiencing this type of memory may believe that he's just reacting to something in the present, remaining completely in the dark about what the rush of feelings that flood his mind and body really represent. Implicit memory is responsible for much of human behavior. Its workings all the more influential because unconscious. This is really such a powerful understanding to have, and this is why I've spent some time going into it today. And a really simple way to put it is it's not your partner's actions or words that are causing all the emotion to come up in you. It's your programming. It's what's going on internally. So if when your partner, for example, is irritable with you, or if he doesn't put down his phone when he's talking to you, or you're trying to have a conversation with him, or when he doesn't hug you after you've been apart for the day, and your feelings get hurt, for example, if these things hurt, or they bring up another hard emotion like fury or a sense of being unimportant or uncared for, it's not so much that these actions of his actually causing these feelings, but rather that these actions on his part, or these lack of actions, are the cue to your mind, body, heart system to run that unconscious programming that's inside of you that has you taking them personally because of your own beliefs, your nervous system, and or your implicit memories based on past experiences. Or in another type of example, if your partner notices other women and you can see that in a glance or a second look he might take, for many people, this can be a trigger that cues their autopilot programming that tells them he's disrespecting me. I'm not enough for him. And of course, that's going to bring up hurt or jealousy or anger, right? Now, I want to make sure that you're not misunderstanding this to mean there's nothing you can do, like just tolerate his less than kind treatment. Now, I want to make sure that you know that you can always, and I advocate for this, ask your partner to say not raise his voice at you, or to give you that hug at the end of the day, or not look at other women, right? You can totally make those requests, and that's a beautiful thing to do. And you can even share what it brings up for you when he does do those things. And if you do that, I suggest that you do so with transparency, vulnerability, and ownership, and definitely not in an accusing way. But more than that, or at least equal to that, your work is to choose to tease apart why what your partner is doing is triggering you. Not so much like what happened in the past, but what's going on inside of you that's leading to the experience you're having, the emotions you're having. And to work with the different levels of your mind, body, heart system in order to calm that trigger and eventually make it not a problem at all. Or I should say to calm that programming, yeah? Because, and this is where so many people go about it backwards, and I have so much compassion for that because I have certainly been there, and I know that we're all just trying to do the best we can with the skills that we have. But the goal isn't to avoid being triggered by stopping the thing that cued your triggered feelings. And what I mean by that is trying to make your significant other stop the behavior that brings up your programming. Like, say, falling asleep when you share from your heart with him, right? The goal isn't to change your partner or stop that behavior as much as it is to evolve beyond, to grow out of that programming, to rewire your brain and nervous system so those things are no longer triggering to you. Because when you avoid addressing the trigger or the programming in you, it keeps it alive in you, always lurking, ready to control you, your emotions, and your behavior at any moment. And I'm sure some of you know that feeling or that experience, right? Where you just know something could set you off. Something could happen or be said by your partner that will just instantly give rise to this intense emotional experience. And that's just no fun at all, I know. So your work is to address it head on, to tease apart the programming in you and work with your mind, body, heart system to let go of that programming. And yes, of course, you can keep making the request for what you'd like, but alongside that, do your work. So I want to give you an example of a new client of mine who, when her partner was upset or at all stressed, it would trigger all sorts of hard feelings in her. And even just by really learning about and applying one of the ways of working with this, after only one session together, she came back and reported on her second session how it wasn't true for her anymore, that she would get triggered when her partner was feeling stressed out or upset. It was still a trigger when he was upset about something that she did. And so for her, that's the next level of work. But his basic upset or stress wasn't something that was getting old programming in her to rear its head and have its claws out, right? She felt much more at peace when her partner was in not so great a mood or feeling a little stressed. So shifting that programming in us, releasing its grip on us, can be done really quickly when you focus on it and you put some quality attention into it. And that's really the point here. If you ignore it and you just try to change your partner or the outer circumstances, it's just always going to keep working its magic, its icky magic on you. Whereas when you just put some focus on it and some quality attention into it and learn how to shift that programming inside of you, it will dissolve. Like this client, you can start observing and noticing and excavating to find out what the programming actually is. And then kind of come in at the level of your mind and brain. And also at the level of working directly with the emotions that arise in you at the moment, right, in the heat of the moment, and with the body, which is where the trigger or that implicit memory is stored. And the truth is, there are many ways to work with a trigger so it doesn't keep triggering the same reactions, that same flood of feelings, and the same actions that come from there that then fuel arguments and disconnection. And oftentimes what works for one person isn't going to be the same recipe for the next person. So it can take some exploring to find the recipe, the approach that works for us. And oftentimes it really is a combination of things that work. Most of the time we want to work with our programming at multiple levels, including at the level of thought and belief and mind, and the level of emotions and the level of your body, like I said a minute ago. But it's always also going to entail self-compassion. And one of the reasons this particular client was so quick to make these changes in her programming is she was already really good at self-compassion. She came in with a good capacity for that. And the reason that self-compassion is so helpful in all of this is because it helps us have a level of peace and care, a sense of care inside of ourselves, instead of being mad at ourselves and treating ourselves and our programming like an enemy, which will only make your work more like a battle, which can actually lock the pattern in. It's more like a fight against it instead of a working with it. When you meet this old programming, your old triggers, with compassion, you actually open the door to real lasting change and creating it with so much more ease and even sweetness in the process. And that word might be surprising for you, but I know it from deep experience that is the experience when you're really in self-compassion. So self-compassion is really an essential ingredient, which is why I always infuse my work, my coaching with it, and I work with my clients to make sure that they are developing self-compassion and that their work is grounded in it. I also want to note that generally any approach to unwinding that programming that's purely a mental approach is less likely to truly eliminate the programming and stop the trigger from being an issue. Although I have definitely had experiences in myself and my clients where that has been enough. It's usually the larger issues, the bigger, longer held patterns or triggers that actually require a multifaceted approach, such as a pattern in life of taking things personally or feeling hurt and uncared for or unimportant. Like that was a pattern of mine. I can trace it back to maybe even the womb. And so just coming in at the mental level to change that wasn't enough for me. I had to come in at multiple angles, multiple levels of my being. Again, when I say that, I mean my emotions, my body, my nervous system, as well as my brain and my mind. And you really can't know exactly what's going to work for you without some exploration. And that's, of course, why I always support my clients on all these levels. We explore them. We work on all the levels so that we can find what actually works for your unique trigger, your unique programming. And I teach aspects of all of these, including what I call being your own zone of safety and love, which is essentially deep self-compassion, in my Stop Taking It So Personally course. So if taking things personally is something that you do, like so many sensitive people, if there's things that your partner does that trigger you, that lead to feeling hurt or anger or feeling offended or disrespected, you definitely want to get access to the Stop Taking It So Personally course. Again, you can go to the link in the show notes or just head over to my website to learn more and purchase that course. So to wrap up, I want to give you some final thoughts. I want to invite you to think about it this way, because the best relationships, the ones that thrive and last and just feel wonderful, are ones that you navigate with a desire to grow in and from, are ones that you consider and use as a place to heal and evolve. When you are triggered in your relationship, that's a good thing, as long as you use it as an opportunity to look at your internal world and work on that old programming, those old wounds, those old beliefs, the way your nervous system goes into fight, flight, or freeze, and you learn to bring big compassion to yourself. Then each time you're triggered, it's a chance to heal that old stuff, that old programming, and build a more loving relationship with yourself and ultimately with your significant other. So instead of, no, yuck, yikes, I hate this, make it stop, or I gotta get him to stop. When you're triggered, say yes to it and do the work on that triggered, that programming to free yourself from it. And do that work when you are triggered, what I call on stage or in the heat of the moment. And also do that work off stage when you are not flooded with those triggered emotions. And the truth is, you could even look forward to the next time you are triggered and then doing your work on it, because it gives you that opportunity to heal it, to heal yourself and the relationship. It gives you a chance to actually make those harder moments, those triggers, into a doorway to even deeper love than ever with your partner. All right, so when a trigger happens, when something happens, your partner does or says something, for example, the work is to do a pivot, a 180-degree spin from the event that happened, say your partner's words or his lack of care, to your own internal world. Pivot to your own internal world. And remember, it's not him that's creating all of this. It's your past, your programming, your own internal world. Own that this triggered experience comes from you and let it point you to bigger and bigger self-compassion and self-support to heal all that's keeping you back from the best relationship possible. I've talked about specific techniques for working with thoughts and feelings and your nervous system in all sorts of episodes on this podcast. If you know that you have some work to do on your nervous system around this, I'm working on what I call the foundations of emotional well-being for highly sensitive people, which is going to be part of Treasured, this next round of Treasured, which is my in-depth marriage coaching program for sensitive women. And it's really like a bonus for signing up. So it's extra, really powerful work. So know that that's in the works. And of course, Treasured is where you go to get all of this really deeply and make the most transformation by getting targeted, personalized support in your specific and unique situation to be able to truly put an end to the triggers and create a depth of love and connection and joy that you've always wanted in your marriage. So the next round of Treasured is coming up in the fall. But if you want to put an end to the hurt feelings and start feeling more love right away in your marriage, the Stop Taking It So Personally course is a perfect starting place. It's an introductory course to working with your body, mind, heart system to really eliminate those triggers and even start seeing your partner respond to you differently, more supportively, more lovingly. And again, I'm running a special, a very limited time special where you get a coupon for $20 off when you sign up for my email list. You'll get that directly delivered to your inbox and you'll want to use it by September 14th. And you'll be on your way to feeling so much less hurt and so much more love in your marriage. Get on my email list by going to the link in the show notes, where you'll also find the direct link to the description of the course. As a last important thought, I want to make sure that you understand if you have had severe trauma and when you're triggered, you go into a sense of intense distress, or you feel nausea or pain, or you feel really panicked, or you dissociate, or you get really aggressive. These are signs you want to get help from a trauma therapist. And I recommend specifically someone that works somatically, that also works on the level of the body. But for many of us, this isn't the case. And you can shift that triggered experience so much by learning some basic skills that have to do with working with your mind, body, heart system. All right, my friends, be oh so well.